We are going to discuss OSI reference model in these visuals. The process of developing standard model for internet working was started in middle of 1970s. It took several years to develop the standard model for internet working. In year 1984, a model was presented. That model considered as the standard model for internet working. That model is known as OSI Open Systems Interconnection Reference Model. This model was created by ISO, International Organization for Standardization. Why this model was created? There are two aspects discussed for this reason. One aspect which is discussed is that in early decades of computer development, there were only few vendors which manufactured computer devices at that time. For example, if an organization willing to have a network at that time, those organizations had to use single vendor's devices. It was not possible at that time to use different vendors' devices so that these different vendors' devices can function together. Other aspect which is discussed is that this OSI model gives a good background to understand internet working. I have used word in internet working few times in our discussions so far. Let's talk little bit about internet working. Let's start with networking. Sometimes we want to share resources with other computers by connecting both the computers with a cable, then make some configurations, and then be able to share resources like internet sharing, data sharing, etc. This is called networking because both these computers belong to the same network. Sometimes we want to expand this networking. We add a switch. In this scenario, you can see switch in the middle of these computers. By using switch, we can share resources with more computers. As you can see in this scenario, we make one computer a server. Through this computer, resources are shared. These all computers also belong to the same network. It is also known as networking. In this scenario, you can see two networks are connected with each other through this serial connection. Apart from using switches, we are using routers also so that we can establish connectivity between these two networks. This scenario is known as internet working. In simple words, internet working means connectivity between two or more networks. Under CCNA objectives, we have to install and maintain small to medium-sized internetworks. So we are going to discuss internet working implementation, maintenance, troubleshooting, etc. throughout this series. There must be some starting point. This OSI model is our starting point. We will understand internet working operation by discussing OSI model. We are going to discuss all these devices you can see here, routers, switches, etc., cables type, routing in upcoming visuals. This is why we are using internet working terminology. I said earlier in these visuals that the process of developing standard model for internet working was started in middle of 1970s. It took several years to develop the standard model for internet working. Finally, the internet working model was standardized in year 1984. It nearly took 10 years to develop an internet working model. Obviously, different steps were involved to develop such kind of a model. A lot of discussion would be done to develop a model. So let's take a look on a scenario and let's analyze this scenario so that it will help us to understand OSI to understand OSI model more comfortably. After discussing this scenario, we will move directly to discuss OSI model. You can see this scenario. This is a building. Just assume this building belongs to an organization. A man will come in this building and he wants to meet the manager. Manager's office is at third floor. How this person will reach manager's office? Let's analyze this person's movement till he reaches manager's office. We will discuss this whole process in steps. In first step, that person will enter in the parking area of this building and park his car. Second step, he may say hello to guard, or maybe he will say nothing to him, but he will enter in the building through the main gate of this building. Now, in third step, the person will enter another mini door which is usually found after main gate of the building. In fourth step, the person will came to the receptionist, ask the person in the reception that I want to meet manager. The receptionist will confirm this person's meeting with the manager, then forward him to manager's office. In step fifth, that person will get into the building. Here he has two options for going to third floor. Now he can go through lift or stairs. Do remember this point, he choose stairs so that he can get some exercise or thing like that. Now in step 6, he is now on third floor and he enters in the manager's office. In step 7, the person handed over a letter to manager. This is how things analyzed. We have analyzed a person reaching manager's office and handed over him a letter. Now we are leaving this discussion here, and let's go and start our discussion on OSI model properly. After that, we will join this discussion again. Earlier in these visuals, I have discussed two aspects which are discussed under OSI reference model. One aspect was it gives a good understanding of internet working operations. Other is OSI reference model divides the operation of internet working, so it helps in ease of development, like more vendors can function together, etc. I said this model divides the operation of internet working. This means that a user which belongs to one network how connects with the users of the other networks. OSI reference model, also known as OSI model. This model divides the operation of internet working into 7 layers. It also describes the function of each layer. These layers then represented by different protocols. What is protocol? You can note this point. Protocol consists of rules through which computers which belong to different networks communicate with each other. These are the 7 layers belong to OSI model. Remember that the OSI model is a logical model. So let's discuss each layer one by one. We start from the top. Application layer. Application layer is the top layer of OSI model. It is also known as layer 7. Under application layer, the end user is directly involved in this layer. Different services are operated in the application layer. You will find intentions of a user in the application layer. Services like Telnet, FTP, HTTP, SMTP, etc. are operated in the application layer. We will discuss all these services later in the later visuals. You can analyze the same. You can analyze the name of this layer. The name of this layer is application, and the service I have mentioned HTTP, etc. These services are considered as applications. You can remember application layer just by focusing on any particular service like HTTP. It is mostly used application. We will also use the example of this application, which is HTTP. HTTP is an abbreviation of Hypertext Transfer Protocol. For example, the user requests information using HTTP like he entering a website abc.com in the browser. This operation of requesting information by using particular application is application layers operation. We can also see the intentions of the user. Application layer relies on presentation layer. How it relies on presentation layer? Let's discuss presentation layer. Presentation layer, also known as layer 6. The presentation layer directly deals with application layer. How presentation layer works? The presentation layer converts the data which belongs to application layer into presentable form. It can also described by these words that presentation layer will present the data which belongs to application layer to the end user in proper form, so that the end user then can get the information or service. Different picture formats, different multimedia formats, etc. are included in this layer. I gave you the example of a user requesting information through HTTP while a bit ago we were discussing application layer. How this request will be presented. This request will be presented by HTML so that the request can be presented to the end user in proper form. Presentation layer's name telling you about its operation. Do not forget that we are discussing OSI model. This all operation belongs to internet working. The user is requesting these services etc. from the other network. You have noticed or not, these both layers have similarities. Yes, there are some similarities like HTTP and HTML must belong to the same layer. Hold these things in your mind. We will discuss all these things so that all these things will get clear. Session layer also known as layer 5. Session layer manages the communication. How it manages the communication? Well, after getting the data from presentation layer, what can be done by this layer? Just look the name of this layer. This layer will start the session of this particular communication so that the request can be fulfilled. Termination of this communication also belongs to session layer, and it also secures this communication by keeping this communication separate so that this particular communication cannot be merged with other communication. Our example of requesting information using HTTP and then presentation layer converts that information into presentable form. Session layer will start the communication session of this communication. Now let's move towards transport layer. Transport layer, also known as layer 4. The name of this layer describing the function of this layer. The duty of transport layer is to deliver the data to the end user. Under transport layer, two ways are function for transporting the data. One is known as connection-oriented way of transporting the data, and the other one is known as connectionless. I am not going to describe both these ways of transporting the data because I do not think it is the best time to describe these terms. Both these terms, which are connection-oriented and connectionless, will be discussed in data encapsulation visuals. But I will show you the difference of both these terms in these visuals, but a bit later. Apart from transporting the data to the end user using a particular transporting way, this layer also performs some other functions also. Let's discuss these functions. Transport layer provides flow control, which means that the delivering of data between sending and receiving systems must be balanced. Flow control makes receiving system to control data delivery speed according to its processing power, so that the sending system does not overprocess the receiving system, etc. There are different types of flow control. You can see here buffering, congestion avoidance, and windowing. Well, moving towards buffering. Using buffering type of flow control makes excessive data stored without processing for receiving system. This excessive data is stored in temporary memory and processed accordingly. Well, under congestion avoidance, receiving system avoids congestion by sending a type of message to the end system, to the sending system. Sending system then reduces the speed of data delivery. Under windowing type of flow control, the data is delivered by the sending system by receiving the acknowledgements from the receiving system. These were the types of flow control. This is how delivery of data is controlled according to processing power of receiving system. Now here you can see order of data. Transport layer also care about order of data. Transport layer marks the data so that the data is arranged in proper order according to those markings by transport layer. You can note this point. I will let you know how transport layer arrange the order of data. Error recovery. Transport layer recovers errors also. We are discussing fourth layer. Now, while reaching fourth layer, there are chances of coming errors in the data. Transport layer recovers error, but first it checks for error and then it corrects the error. It uses algorithms to detect the errors. After detecting the errors, it applies method to correct those errors. For detecting the errors, it uses CRC. CRC means cyclic redundancy check. And for correcting the errors, the method which is used is known as ARQ. ARQ means automatic repeat request. Well, these are the functions which are provided by transport layer apart from delivering the data. TCP, Transmission Control Protocol, and UDP, User Datagram Protocol, are examples of transport layer. In our example of some information is requested, that information is now processed by transport layer, and now that information is ready to go to the next layer. Let's discuss network layer. Well, network layer is also known as layer 3. Network layer provides function of routing. We are discussing OSI model. When we discuss OSI model, it means that we are discussing internetworking. As I mentioned before, internetworking means connectivity between two or more networks. We have discussed above 4 layers. Under those layers, we have seen preparation of data. As we're discussing internetworking, so network layer routes the data to the destined network from this network, which is a source network. How network layer routes the data from source network to destination network. As I mentioned earlier in this visuals, that layers are represented by different protocols. Network layer places source protocol of the sending system and destination protocol of the receiving system while containing the data. After putting these source and destination protocols, network layer got the information of source and destination networks. Now, then it delivers the data to the destined network. A very famous protocol, which is IP, Internet Protocol, is an example of network layer. There are two versions of IP version 4 and IP version 6. We are going to have very detailed discussion on IP later in the series. We know IP because it is used widely. Apart from IP, IPX is also operated at this layer. Our example of requested information will be routed to the network from where the information is requested. The information will be routed by putting source and destination IP addresses of the networks. Data link layer, also known as layer 2. As we have discussed in network layer, that the network layer delivers the data to the destined network by putting source and destination protocols. You can see that the data is sent to the destination network. The data must reach the user who requested the data, and the user belongs to the network, which is destination network. It is the network where the data is sent by the network layer. The duty of data link layer is to send the data to the destination user. Data link layer also performs some more functions. We will discuss these functions also. Data link layer sends the data to the destination user. We have discussed that network layer sends the data to the destination network by putting source and destination, by putting IP addresses of source and destination. Data link layer does not put IP addresses. Data link layer puts MAC addresses of source and destination devices. We have discussed MAC addresses in our previous visuals. Now, data link layer will put the source MAC address of the device where data arrives from network layer. It does not put the MAC address of the device which belongs to the application layer. Data link layer will put the destination MAC address of the destination device which belongs to the user directly. You can note this point. It will be discussed in later visuals in much detail. I will explain you all this while discussing routing section. Now, data link layer works under LAN, local area network. Like I said while discussing network layer, that network layer sends data to the other network. Network layer works under internetworking and delivers the data to the destined network. Data link layer then receives that data and sends the received data to the destined user while working under local area network. Under data link layer, some other functions are also performed. Data link layer performs flow control, where receiving device controls the flow of data according to its capacity of processing. It performs order of data according to the sequence. When data is delivered, the order of data may break the sequence, etc. While delivering the data, if error occurs, data link layer informs upper layers regarding these errors. Apart from performing these functions, data link layer also converts the data for physical layer so that physical layer can function. These are the functions performed under this layer. Final thing regarding data link layer is that the data link layer has two sub-layers. I am not going to discuss these sub-layers. We are understanding OSI model. and I do not think this is the best time to discuss these sublayers. We will discuss all this in data encapsulation visuals. Physical layer, also known as layer 1. As I said a bit earlier, that data link layer converts the data for physical layer. This is the last layer of OSI model. What do you think? What is left? Well, I tell you, data link layer converts the data into bits which are zeros and ones for physical layer, so that physical layer then transmit the data directly to the user through cable. A user is connected to internetwork through a cable, so data has reached the user through that cable. Under physical layer, data travels in form of bits and reaches the user. Finally, user got his required information. These are the functions performed under these 7 layers of OSI reference model. We have discussed an example earlier in these visuals. Let's take a look on this example and let's apply these 7 layers on that example. Now, that man handed over the letter to the manager. That letter is considered as application layer. That letter was presented in envelope, so it will be considered as presentation layer. Okay, now session layer would be when the man enters the manager's office. Okay, now we have applied these 3 layers on these events. Let's look at layer 4. Layer 4 is transport layer, as we have discussed in a bit earlier in the same visuals. Well, I have discussed that there are 2 ways of transporting the data while discussing transport layer. Here you can see there is a lift and there is stairs also. If I choose lift to go to the 3rd floor, I can choose, and if I choose stairs to go to the 3rd floor, I can choose this option also. But the difference we'll consider. I can say to go through lift is much reliable than stairs. Well, so these types of differences are found in 2 ways of transporting the data, which I have mentioned a bit earlier while discussing transport layer of OSI model. We will discuss these ways in data encapsulation visuals. Now, layer 3. Layer 3 routes the data I mentioned while discussing network layer. Here I mentioned inside building area as layer 3. Layer 2 sends the data to the end user using MAC addresses. That main gate playing the role of layer 2 for our example. Now, our parking area securing the car. Parking area also connecting that man to get his car. This is why I make parking area layer 1. Well, using examples help us to understand things. This example also doing the same thing. Through this example, you can remember OSI model. This example almost covering every point of OSI model. Well, I present you an internet working model earlier in these visuals. As I said, we are discussing this model to understand internet working operations. Let's apply these layers on this internet working model. We use the example of user requests information through HTTP. sorry, wrong image. Now we are on right image right now. Well, this server belongs to that service which is requested by user. Layer 7, layer 6 and layer 5 are performed by this server. OSI model helps us to understand each function, so that is why we understand all these functions separately, although these functions belong to the same window of operation. Performing HTTP application and presenting it in HTML and starting the session of the communication. Transport layer is also performed by the server. The server will confirm the way of transporting. After that, network layer performs the function of routing. You can see these devices, the router B and router A. These are routers. These are the devices which connects the network. That router B, will send the data to the destination network's router, which is router A, using source and destination IP addresses. The receiving router, this is our receiving router at this time, will hand it that data to the switch. Here you can see. The switch will perform the function of data link layer. The computer connected to that switch is the destination user. This switch then delivers the data to this user. Now tell me now what is left. This wire connecting the user to the switch will be considered as physical layer. This is how each layer is applied on internet working. We almost done regarding OSI model. Let's look at some advantages of OSI model. Here you can see some advantages. Understand, OSI model provides a good understanding of operation of internet working, as we have discussing so far. OSI model also helps in development, like different vendors can function together, etc. Troubleshoot. We have discussed OSI models, each layer, and in good detail. In case of troubles, OSI layered approach helps to shoot the trouble accurately. Now the advantages of OSI model are not limited to these discussed advantages. There could be more advantages. Well, with this we are concluding these visuals. We have discussed OSI reference model in detail. We have also applied OSI reference model on a scenario, building scenario, and then we apply these layers on an internet working model. Well, if you feel any problem, you can just replay these visuals and be prepared for upcoming visuals. Thank you.